Hey everybody, hello again. Brian from Progressive Force Concepts here with another drill for you ARFCOM users out there. Today's is called Failure to Failure. Very simple, very straightforward, very easy to explain and to set up. You're going to need a carbine that has not only an optic on it but also backup iron sights. The purpose of this drill is to train the individual shooter to transition from a failed optic wherein the battery's gone dead, there's been a problem with the reticle, whatever it may be, transitioning to their backup iron sights. However, before transitioning to the iron sight, they're going to use the actual tube of the optic as a large rear aperture. We know that that's pretty substantial in size. It's going to create a lot of slop. And what we want to see is, without wasting time and deploying the backup iron sights, if the individual shooter using that as a rear aperture can achieve a measure of accuracy out to a given distance. We all know that probably at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 10 meters, that just pointing the rifle, they're still going to be able to lay rounds in the vital zone of the target. But we want to see how that massive aperture actually behaves out to 25, 35, 45 meters. So essentially the drill will work like this. The shooter will they'll come up, they'll have the optic in an off position or a disabled position, deactivated. They'll discover that the optic is not working. They're still going to press that shot off again using it as a large aperture. And then after that's done, they're going to deploy the backup iron sights and then squeeze off a sequence of rounds in whatever shooting response that they want to. Measure the distance at which that first shot loses effectiveness, and also measure the time that it takes for the individual shooter to take and deploy those backup iron sights. Now, that being said, and all of that out of the way, 2 points that we want to hit on. First, I've seen a lot of chatter amongst individuals lately who are talking about the lack of need or the total lack of necessity for backup iron sights. We don't think anything could be further from the truth. This is analogous to taking the spare tire out of the trunk of your vehicle. This is analogous to taking off that reserve parachute when you jump out of an aircraft. Even though you may have an optic that you personally, in your personal experience, has not failed you, is it necessarily worth that happening in a crisis moment, in an in extremis situation? Imagine carrying a one-shot pistol because on the range you've taken and you've fired one round successfully before that took and entered the cranial-ocular cavity. I don't need another magazine. I don't even need any of those other rounds. It's kind of ludicrous when you dissect it in that fashion. We've seen both operationally and in a training environment. Operationally, IEDs going off, explosions, even just small arms fire does in fact often contact the weapon. It actually hits the weapon and can disable or break certain components. During force on force, the weapons itself, even optics, forward lenses on the optic we have seen get compromised during force on force training. There's another video on our YouTube channel that specifically addresses this point. We've seen it happen to other students as well. Use those backup iron sights. Part 2, we've all heard the phrase before, that's the way we've always done it. Think about a common flat top receiver with a rail system that lacks a standard front sight tower. The beauty of this system is it allows modularity in the individual end user to configure it in the fashion that they want to. But what do people do? They buy their backup front, they buy their backup rear. Front sight goes all the way to the forward position on the forward rail. Backup sight in the rear, where does it go? All the way to the rearward position on the back system. So the problem in this is that that's the way we've always done it, is that we've seen other people set up the weapon system that way, and it's more analogous to the way a fixed front iron sight and a fixed rear iron sight is. Many guys in the military have been taught that notion of putting the nose on the charging handle. Well, have you challenged that? Have you challenged that paradigm? For a left-handed shooter like myself, a backup iron sight that's fully back on the rail actually interferes with charging handle operation and forces some guys to take and put on an extended charging handle and even come underneath. Have you personally experimented with the positioning of those backup iron sights? We hear guys talk about sight radius and an enhanced accuracy by spreading those sights further apart. Have you tested this individually? We have. We've put backup iron sights on a rifle as close as they are on a handgun with a 5 or 6 inch radius and still effectively been able to engage targets out to 300 meters. Oftentimes when those backup irons are mounted all the way forward or all the way back, they will interfere with a visible white light, they'll interfere with a laser aiming device, and they can also interfere with deployment of an optic. Think of the eye relief that exists on an ACOG, for example, which is 1 inch to 1.25 inches. As we commonly say, make your equipment work for you, you shouldn't work for your equipment. If the backup irons, either the front or the rear, are getting in the way of my manipulation of controls, take and move them. Don't worry about eye relief. Look at the eye relief from the eyeball to the rear sight on an AK-47. It's significantly further forward with a shorter sight radius, and it doesn't necessarily adversely affect accuracy or the shooter's ability to take and get rounds on target. on the notion of your optic. The farther back your optic is mounted, within reason, if it's a 1 power, closer to the eye, your visual perception of the size of the rear lens becomes greater. What does this mean? It means that the optic will actually tolerate more slop in the mounting process. If you're working from unconventional positions or working bilateral with a gas mask, it actually becomes easier to get your eyeball behind that lens and actually find that red dot. Don't take my word for it. Play around with it. Move these items around. You'll even notice that my backup iron in the rear is reversed. It's actually in a reverse position. There is a reason behind that. I'll let you guys try that out on your own and see if it works for you. Give these all a try. I think you may be surprised at the results you uncover. Stay safe.